The restaurant was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and families gathered around decorated tables. But in the corner, beneath balloons that were beginning to droop, sat a girl in a wheelchair, her birthday crown tilting slightly, her smile fading with every passing second. She was the daughter of one of the city's most powerful CEOs, yet in this moment she looked like the loneliest person in the world. Plates of untouched cake sat before her, candles unlit, while the people she expected to come never arrived. Her father, always buried in meetings and business calls, had promised he would be there. But as the clock ticked past an hour, it was clear he had broken yet another promise. Around her, waiters glanced sympathetically, but no one dared approach. Customers whispered, assuming she had been stood up by friends. What they didn't know was that she had no friends. Years of isolation, being hidden away because of her condition, had left her forgotten even by those who should have loved her most. In the middle of the crowd, a single dad entered the restaurant with his young son. They noticed the girl immediately, the way she tried to act cheerful, clapping her hands softly to herself, pretending everything was fine. But her trembling lips betrayed her. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve, his innocent eyes full of empathy. The father hesitated for a moment, then began to walk toward her table, and in that moment, everything began to change. Break for next chapter. The girl's gaze lifted as the man and his son approached. For the first time all evening, her lonely corner was no longer empty. The little boy placed a flower he had been carrying on her table, a wildflower he had picked earlier on the way in. She blinked in surprise, her voice caught in her throat, but she forced a polite smile. The father motioned to the waiter, asking quietly if he could bring another plate. Within minutes, the once lonely table had company, laughter, and warmth. Boy began sharing stories about his day, his innocent chatter breaking through the silence that had suffocated her birthday. Slowly the girl's stiff shoulders relaxed, and a soft glow returned to her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't invisible. Her birthday cake was lit again, this time by strangers who cared more than her own family ever had. Around them, the restaurant shifted. People who had been ignoring her now began to pay attention. Some looked guilty, realizing they could have done something sooner. Others looked curious, whispering about the man who dared to sit with the CEO's disabled daughter as though she were just any other child. What no one in that room knew was that this simple act of kindness would ripple into something far greater, something that would shake the entire city. Because the man sitting across from her wasn't just a father. He was a single dad who had lost everything, and this moment of kindness would connect his story with hers in ways no one could imagine. Next chapter. The door swung open with force, and in came the CEO, dressed sharply, his phone pressed to his ear. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on the sight that froze him, his daughter smiling, truly smiling, for the first time in years. But it wasn't because of him. It was because of strangers. Strangers who had done in minutes what he had failed to do for years. Embarrassment and anger filled his chest as whispers spread across the restaurant. People wondered how a man with so much power could let his own daughter sit alone on her birthday. Cameras flashed. Someone had already begun recording the scene. The CEO, known for his pride, couldn't stand the humiliation. He tried to dismiss the father and son, waving them away as if they were unworthy of sitting at his table. But his daughter's trembling hand gripped the armrest of her chair, refusing to let them leave. For the first time, she resisted her father's commands, and the room fell silent, watching a story unfold that was larger than wealth, larger than reputation. It was about love, dignity, and the failure of a man who had forgotten both. The father didn't argue. He simply stood tall, looked at the girl with a nod of reassurance, and began guiding his son toward the door. But before he could leave, the CEO's daughter called out, not with words, but with a desperation in her eyes. She needed them. And deep down, the father knew this wasn't the end. Break for next chapter. News of the incident spread quickly. Videos of the CEO's daughter sitting alone went viral overnight. People across the city condemned the father who had everything, yet couldn't give his child the simplest gift of love. But amidst the noise, attention shifted to the man who had stepped in. The single dad. Whispers began to circulate. Who was he? Why did he show such compassion when everyone else turned away? Soon the truth came out. He was a former engineer, once at the top of his field, until a scandal orchestrated by corporate elites destroyed his career. He had been left to raise his son alone, working odd jobs to survive. The same corporate circle that ruined him was the very world the CEO thrived in. When the CEO learned of this, his pride twisted into rage. He couldn't bear the idea that a man he once helped crush was now being seen as a hero for doing what he himself had failed to do. And so, he plotted to make the single dad disappear from the headlines. But what he didn't realize was that this story had already grown beyond his control. Because his daughter, tired of being hidden, tired of being ignored, had found in that single dad the one thing she had been searching for her whole life. Someone who saw her as human. Break for next chapter. For years, she had been silent, obedient, and invisible. But after that night, something inside her changed. She began reaching out, speaking up, and telling the truth about her loneliness. She revealed how her father's empire had forced her into the shadows, ashamed of her condition. Her words struck like lightning, spreading across the internet, shaking investors and employees alike. The CEO's reputation crumbled under the weight of his daughter's courage. People admired her strength, and many began supporting the single dad who had unknowingly sparked her transformation. He became a symbol of integrity, a reminder that love and kindness mattered more than power and wealth. Meanwhile, the CEO tried desperately to silence the storm. But no matter how much money he threw at the problem, the truth was unstoppable. His daughter no longer stood behind him in silence. She stood before him, demanding change, and in the background, the man who had simply shown kindness on one lonely night was suddenly at the center of a movement. Break for next chapter. The fall of the CEO was swift. Shareholders withdrew, partners abandoned him, and the empire he had built began to collapse. But in the ruins of his downfall, something beautiful rose. His daughter, once hidden, became the voice of those forgotten and dismissed. With a single dad's guidance, she founded an organization that gave opportunities to disabled children, proving that her life had meaning far greater than her father's empire. The single dad, once broken by injustice, found not just redemption but a family he never expected. His bond with the girl grew, and his son found in her the sister he had always wished for. Together they rebuilt something stronger than money could ever buy: love, dignity, and truth. And as for the CEO, he was left with the bitter realization that all the power in the world meant nothing without love. His wealth had bought him silence, but it could never erase the shame of watching strangers give his daughter the happiness he had denied her. The story became legend, not of riches or power, but of a birthday no one came to until one single dad walked over the end.